and welcome to the Service Management Show from the team here at Efficode. This episode we're going to be talking about service financial management and the tracking of costs. I'm joined by Patrick Savago from Tempo Software. Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yeah, thanks for having me, Gary. So I've been at Tempo for a little while now as a solutions engineer. So my role here is making sure we are not just selling things, but actually building things out and solving problems for people. And my background is pretty heavily in the ITSM space. So last and before here, I was Director of Support Services at T-Metrics, and we had to solve a lot of the problems ourselves that we're talking about here today in more rudimentary methods that are available nowadays. So been an interesting space to get into. Been in the Atlassian ecosystem for a while as well. So heading up our internal Jira administration while I was there.
Okay, brilliant. I just realised I forgot to introduce myself. So if you didn't watch episode 1, my name is Gary Blower. I'm the IT service manager practice lead in the UK and US. So it's basically what I get up to. Right. So I'm going to set the scene a little bit. So we get asked, both Patrick and I were discussing before the podcast, we get asked a lot about how do I track costs and financials. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit with where we're coming from in terms of service management and financial reporting. So first of all, very dry thing, I'm going to read out the ITIL definition because this was quite useful in kind of setting the scene. But it says the purpose of service financial management is to support the organization's strategies and plans for service management by ensuring that the organization's financial resources and investments are being used effectively. What that means in plain English is basically tracking the financials and the costs of service delivery and the consumption, understanding the costs of actually delivering your services and providing products, and also producing financial information for reporting. That's essentially what it's all about. We were chatting beforehand and we were saying that quite in IT service management, it's very common to be asked about how to track costs. But what sort of costs do you typically come across when people ask those sort of questions?
The biggest is labor to start with, just because so much of incident management impacts throughout the ITSM ecosystem that it's hard to predict what your costs are going to be. And when you've got teams that are working on incident management as well as other things, they're having to jump back and forth from fire to fire frequently. So it's very hard for them to say, oh, right, on this day, I spent 10 minutes on this and an hour and a half on that. Mm-hmm. So labor is the biggest one. But then you also get like your CapEx expenses, like server infrastructure or server rentals or software services you're renting, anything along those lines. And then you've also got your sort of one-off expenses. But those tend to be, when we talk to clients, lower on the totem pole, and it's more the labor and then the CapEx expenses that are what they want to keep track of.
Indeed. And in fact, in a little bit, we'll talk about some use cases around sort of tracking costs. But certainly in my experience, I mean, service management is a broad church and covers many different things. But the one common denominator really is that providing a service costs money. And as you said, whether that's labor costs or if it's infrastructure costs or it's delivery costs. And for some customers as well, the cost is also something that they want to pass on to their customer. So, that could be quite important. So we've got a few use cases to run through. We're just sort of talking the round about them. So the first one is about sort of tracking the total cost of support. What sort of factors would we include in that sort of cost tracking and measurement?
Yeah, so primary ones would be whoever's doing the initial support, but then you've also got escalation points, so you could have multiple people working on a service request or a problem or an incident, whatever it is. We'll just speak broadly. It'll just say a ticket, and I think all your audience will just take that broadly to know it covers all manner of sin, right? So you could have multiple people working on a ticket, and knowing that those people have different rates can cause complexities. And then when the service is going to require cost, so let's say you're doing a licensing request for an internal customer, so you're going to have to provide, say, email licensing or something to that effect, the cost of that afterward. That's sort of some common requests that we'll get. And really sort of the day-to-day, if you can predict those reliably you can really see what direction you're going. So even if you can't get 100% accuracy, then as long as you know the direction you're going, you can make the right decisions, which is really the goal of tracking anything, right? To do something with that information.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you alluded it to it there, that sometimes the complexity comes in if there's different rates, different service tiers, different clients, different budgets are involved. Then something that seems as straightforward as just tracking, how much labor cost. It couldn't be much more complex because it could be different accounts and different rates and
right.
Yeah, exactly. Another use case what is quite common is tracking the cost of. I think you mentioned it earlier as well about sort of tracking the cost of an incident. Do you want to sort of describe that in a little more detail?
Yeah. So the cost of an incident is rarely just the straightforward amount of time that the first person spent on it, because there may be overhead time that they're spending, administrative work. They might have an escalation point that they're just talking to on Slack or Teams or whatever communication platform they're using. So there are a lot of ways that the cost of an incident can go sort of dark when you're not sure what's going on, even if it's just somebody talking to a peer on their team, not escalating it. Mm-hmm. So it can be a struggle to know exactly how much time was spent on any given incident. And, you kind of have to, one of the struggles I'd always fought in the past was how much guesswork was involved, how much time are people logging, how much of that accurate. And then a big piece of it is because the nature of that is that it's sort of disruptive, unplanned work. People are going to miss logging time on it. Yeah. And you don't want to go, yelling at people for not logging enough time, because of what they're doing work. It's just that overhead tracking it. You don't want to cause, sort of a toxic environment by forcing people to go spend more time logging it than they did doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that incident, that cost data related to incidents can also be a key driver into business cases to try to prevent and mitigate the instance in the first place. Yeah. So
yeah, think of it like an insurance policy or the same concept, right? So have you seen the movie Fight Club? One of the references they make is about if the cost of a defect on a car is less than the lawsuits they're going to get, then they don't fix it, right? Now that's kind of a nihilistic version of it. But if you know how much a particular problem is happening, you can then work within your organization, like up to, let's say, your product team or your leadership team, of what bigger problems you want to fix, because what's actually taking time away from providing good service otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final one, and I think this will kind of segue nicely into sort of talking about some of the products that you guys do, is actually in terms of a service team, it's not just about understanding the costs of delivering the service, it's also about trying to forecast and predict what some of those costs might be. And that can relate to things like project costs. So again, what type of, if we're looking to sort of plan ahead and forecast ahead what our costs are going to be, what sort of methods can we use to do that?
Yeah, so some of the most accurate ones that we found is using historical analysis of what your service costs have been tied to driver events. So if you've got, let's say, we'll go a simple example. If you know that a network infrastructure update is coming and you're replacing some switches or things like that. So you can have requests tied to a network infrastructure upgrade, and then you know that you're going to have larger incidents coming in. So the planned work of the server upgrade or the infrastructure upgrade, you could then forecast how many people reported incidents the previous time and get an idea of how many labor hours are going to come into play, and then what that cost will be.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about how we might address this. So obviously we're specifically going to talk about the Jira ecosystem, Jira Service Management, the Jira platform, and of course, you guys at Tempo, this is what you specialize in. So in terms of the Tempo products, what's the kind of best blend to look at in terms of, if we want to, if I'm a service team, I want to start establishing some kind of cost tracking and forecasting?
Right. So for your baseline, you'll be using timesheets, planner, and cost tracker. And then if you want to get more advanced in how you're processing the information, maybe structure. And if you want to democratize that information going out to the rest of the organization, maybe custom charts. So, but at your baseline, timesheets, because, garbage in, garbage out, you need to be tracking time accurately in order to use any of this information. So timesheets has a lot of functionality that removes some friction from having to go out and log time. And then Planner, you can then take those planned initiatives, plan those service requests, know what the rough estimate is. And then, sort of in the background, you might want to use some, maybe some built into your automation to set initial estimates on certain service requests based historically, so that when the requests come in, you know how to forecast that. So that works really nicely with Planner to then look at your timing of what's coming up. And then that planned work tying into Cost Tracker, you can have rates per person. And very near future, we'll be able to have the rates per person per account. So if you have different rates for different customers, you could have that forecasted out. So those three together blend really nicely. And then if you want to be able to then add some advanced formulas on it, then structure fits well. And if you want people outside of the ITSM ecosystem to look at some pretty visualizations, you can then take custom charts and then throw that on there too.
Yeah, I love custom charts.
Somebody made a joke internally recently. It's like Frank's Red Hot Sauce. You can throw it on anything.
It's a very good one. I think we all know they also throw the best parties at teams.
They do indeed.
So, and you mentioned Cost Tracker. So, something which here in Efficode we've got much more of a focus of in the ITSM practice. And interestingly, we were discussing the other day, and it's not just the labor costs you can track in that either, is it? You can actually track different types of costs within Cost Tracker.
Correct. Yeah. So you can track OpEx expenses or one-off expenses. You have recurring expenses. So some common ITSM use cases we'll have are either licensing that your ITSM team needs to do their job, or the licensing for something that a customer purchased. So as part of the service request, if a purchase was involved, then you could have the cost of that going in. So yeah, it all fits together into some nice visualizations. And then again, with the forecasting of what's done in Planner to then see what you can expect your spend, maybe monthly, quarterly, however you want to visualize it on a per project basis. You can really slice and dice it.
And you can compare that against the budget as well, can't you? Like a burn down against the budget.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah, you can set a budget. You can set milestones. So if you've got it, let's say it's an initiative driven one. So maybe you're doing a big SSO rollout and you've got a budget for that. At certain milestones, you should be a percentage of the way through the work, and you can compare your milestone progress of the budget to the progress of the planned work, so you can get an idea if you're on track to meet your target or not, or if you're going to go over or under budget.
And if people want to get a flavor of how these products work, you guys got like a YouTube channel with demos and things on it?
We do, yeah. So we've got, if you search YouTube for Tempo, or if you go to, or for Tempo software, or if you go to just tempo.io, and you can get to our Learn section, and then there's YouTube, there's white papers, there's all kinds of content out there.
Awesome. Okay. And sort of looking forward, we know that, Atlassian are driving the platform forward. They're introducing lots of stuff. Atlassian Intelligence has become, the latest thing to be added, and that's kind of really helping with JSM. What's the kind of future direction, do you think, in terms of, both tempo and in terms of managing things like budgets and costs?
Yeah, so we are in the midst of some work on some AI timesheet work, and it's going to help sort of that manual effort that is taken for people to log time, because that's one of the gaps, right? It's that administrative overhead. So we're excited about that because it removes, it makes data more accurate because you're less likely to miss things, but also it removes some of that friction we talked about earlier of the management teams having to harp on people to log their work. But I've been working all day. I've been helping all these customers and doing these great things. Like, let me do that, right? So it helps to enable that piece.
Okay, cool. And I think I remember webinar we had with you guys a while back. You're looking to have a lot more integrations between the various Tempo products as well, aren't you?
Yes, and a lot of that is already live on cloud, and some of it in data center as well. So if you want to think of sort of the theme behind it, a lot of the integrations are tying to structure almost being a data source. Yeah. So you can build a structure to really curate the data you want. Maybe you're looking at an initiative for an internal rollout, or maybe you're looking at a set of features that you're going to be releasing, and then have that tied to your Cost Tracker, so that you know that the same people that are planning the work are also, and the people that are looking at the budget for it are seeing that same information. And then that can also feed custom charts. So somebody that's sort of democratizing that data across the organization that just wants to know how things are going, they can then same data set. So that's actually live in cloud now.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, because I had a client a year or two ago now where they had a very complex change management process, and we actually used structure to help them with that because, native it's quite difficult to visualize the change and the hundreds of tasks they had.
Yeah.
And by creating those flexible structures, so the ability to then tie that into financial information and reporting, that's going to be big, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, again, you kind of mentioned off there, but I just wanted to bring up when I asked you sort of, what's the future direction? One of the things you said was we want to make everything easier. Right. I didn't know if you wanted to kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So people don't want to use tools, right? They just want to do their jobs, and this whole ecosystem, like the entire Atlassian ecosystem, is about enabling people to do their jobs. Like doing stuff in Jira isn't the work. Doing stuff in Jira is documenting and talking about the work. So we've been doing it. So these integrations that you're talking about, so structure being the background, that, one of the key facets there is it removes a lot of meetings, a lot of emails, a lot of communication, or when those meetings do happen, they're informed. So you could have somebody that is even at an enterprise level where your ITSM team is also working with your product team and your development teams to work on, let's say, infrastructure changes that are prerequisites for a big rollout. All of that stuff tied together inside of structures, inside of Cost Tracker, that tight integration goes a long way to facilitate conversations.
Awesome. Right. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much wraps things up. If they want to find out more information, or if they want to reach out to yourself, Patrick, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah. So best bet for more info is just tempo.io. You can find me on LinkedIn, it's Patrick Savago, and I'm happy to connect people with others in the organization as needed.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, to our viewers and our listeners, please do share this series with your friends. Like and subscribe the video wherever you find it, YouTube and LinkedIn and things. And if you are viewing this on LinkedIn, then do leave us comments on our LinkedIn posts. And like Patrick, you can find myself on LinkedIn as well, Gary Blower. So all I need to do is wrap up really and just thank Patrick for joining me on the show this month.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gary.
No problem. And I hope you'll join us next month for the next episode of the Service Management Show. So I'll see you all then.
Go team, go.